like everyone else had their presentations memorized, and I'm like, I cheat. I use notes. I know myself too well.
So everyone, please welcome me in joining Miss Amarita Natt.
All right, let's jump right in. So, my name is Amarita Natt. I am an economist by training. I have a doctorate in applied empirical economics. So my specialty is really statistical modeling, causal inference modeling, just the heavy-duty data modeling for business optimization mostly. I also work with expert witnesses doing litigation support. So again, price fixing, antitrust. This is sort of what I focus on. But in my time in data, I've often found myself as the first data scientist, the lone data scientist, brought in to refresh a team, not many resources. And I've learned a few things along the way that I think can be helpful for all of us who are working with smaller organizations or older organizations who are just dipping their toes into data science, and they're relying on you to help them, to teach them. So at the moment, my specialty is causal inference, but I end up doing a lot of consulting on tools and techniques for different firms. So I want to walk through 4 scenarios that I've encountered personally and give you some examples of how I handled them. The first is you're the lone wolf. You're the only data scientist. You're the first person they've ever brought in. They're relying on you to do a lot of teaching. We're going to talk about some tactics there and some pitfalls that you might run into. The second is you've been brought in as part of a team. You've brought in specifically as a team lead. Your team knows some data science, they use some current tools, but they want to transition into new technology or new processes, and they've brought you in to do that. The third is a variant of that. You've been brought into an existing team, but you're a team member. You were hired. They were super excited that you were really fluent with X tool. And you've been brought in, and then you realize that no one in this firm actually uses X tool. So it's going to be a little bit on you to help them get comfortable and move into this new world that they want to be a part of. And finally, in some ways the hardest, you're an outside consultant who's been brought in for your area of expertise. Again, in my personal experience, that's statistical modeling or predictive modeling. But your client wants some sort of a deliverable that they can reuse over and over again, and they want it to be in some sort of tool that they're not necessarily super familiar with. That one's going to be the fun one, and it's the one I deal with the most right now. So let's get started. Jump in. You're the lone wolf. You're the only person using the tools. The good news is you don't really have to worry about a whole lot of other people. The bad news is you're on your own. So there are a few things you're going to want to think about, things that maybe they didn't tell you when they were hiring you. The first is plan for the future. You're using these tools now, but ideally, if you grow this practice out the way you want to, who's going to be using these tools in 2 years? Who's going to be using these tools in 3 years? If you're thinking 5 years out, that's really great planning, but I've never seen a 5-year plan go according to what you expect. Still, it might be a good exercise. The second is, what are going to be your deliverables? If you're the first data scientist, chances are you're going to start out doing a lot of reporting type things, a lot of current state, business intelligence, data analysis, right? But hopefully the goal is down the line to be creating more sophisticated modeling. And in that case, what you're doing right now may not be what you're doing a year from now or 2 years from now. So you're going to want to think about that when you're choosing your tool. You'll notice that at the moment, and for the most part, I don't talk about specific tools. And that's just because it's what you use is on you, not on me. But I think you would experience this no matter what tools you were bringing in. And this is more of a general sort of tactic, so how to get in and get your tools adopted by. So future users, future deliverables. Cost. If your tool is expensive, you're going to have to make a business case for it. This is something I have learned at countless companies. You are going to have to make a business case for everything. It's really annoying. No one teaches you how to do it. But the basics are, you have to think about how your tool is more efficient, how your tool is faster, how it saves your company money, whether it's worth the financial outlay. You've just got to make that argument. And you've got to practice that argument, because they're going to have points that they're going to counter with. If you're choosing a tool that has a frequently used open source alternative, you might need to make an argument for why your tool is better than this open source alternative. If you're making an argument for an open source tool, which many of us do, I use almost exclusively open source tools, you're going to have to feel out management for certain concerns. In my experience, a lot of companies on the business side are really wary of open source. They see open source as easily exploitable. You have to explain to them that knowing how a lock works doesn't mean you can open it without the key. They think that open source is more vulnerable in general. It's less quick to be patched. You just have to show them that there's a huge community of users who patch those things and maintainers who patch problems very quickly. And finally, and this one's a little bit harder to handle, there's no vendor to blame. So if you're going open source, they can't go back and say, well, SAS, your program had an epic bug in it, and it cost us X million dollars, and what are you going to do to make us whole again? In my work, it's a little easier. I do adversarial replication of all of my models, and I point out that we should be at the point of figuring out these major issues long before we're at the point of blaming the vendor. But your mileage may vary, and that one's actually a little bit of a harder one to sort of argue against. Now, if you're the only user, that might not be too bad. But you have to think about who's going to be using it as we move forward. Finally, always remember to document. Regardless of what tool you're using, go early, go often. When you start as the lone data scientist, it's really easy to forget that step. So I throw it in not because it's a tactic for getting your tool in use, but it's a tactic for keeping your tool in use and keeping your own sanity. Because as the only data scientist at the firm, at the moment, you're going to be the repository of a lot of tacit knowledge, a lot of things that you store in your head. Make sure that you have a good code repository and a good narrative documentation structure so that you know why you were doing whatever this code actually does. So, my thoughts for lone data scientists: plan for the future, document, be prepared to do a lot more teaching and selling than you ever thought you would ever have to do. Again, it's on you to teach this firm why you're using the tools you're using, why you're doing the techniques that you're doing. Oh, why did I skip team leader? All right, well, I guess my slides are just messed up, sorry. Actually, before we do that, let's talk about the scenario that I dealt with. So, I was brought in and was in talks with an older firm. They were a large automotive firm. They've been around for a long time. They had a really robust data science team for their financial modeling side. They were interested in building a marketing data science team from scratch. They had no one. I would have been the person, or whoever we hire is going to be the person who comes in and builds it up. They had a few strengths. They had, for instance, a concrete amount of money that they wanted to save and a concrete goals for what this team would accomplish in a certain amount of time. That's huge. They had really strong support from their upper management. So they had a VP who was assigned specifically for this project and for this task. They had a lot of interested people in adjacent teams who could get you familiar with their systems and processes in place. And they understood that it was going to take some time. They knew that the transition would be slow. They had a few weaknesses too. Their data was in all sorts of different places, and the DBAs were in conflict. So you were going to have to be somewhat of a data architect, data engineer, and therapist to get everybody to get along, to get your data where you needed it to be. They had really no understanding of current state data analytics versus future state predictive modeling or causal inference modeling. So whoever took this over was going to start by doing a whole lot of reporting that might not be very interesting to them. Hopefully down the line, you're doing lots of fun, really cool multi-level models, but in the beginning, that's not what you're doing, and you're going to be responsible for a whole lot of different deliverables that seem to be in conflict with each other. I want to check if they had any more weaknesses. I feel like that's not too many to overcome. They also had some pretty intense concerns about budget and security. So they were very sensitive about what tools were going to be chosen. They wanted a lot of teaching around that, and it was very clear, they made it very clear from the very beginning that it was going to take a lot of work to get them to adopt whatever tool you thought was appropriate for this task. Even if you were, for instance, as I was intending to, use the same tool that their financial modeling division was using. The bureaucracy was such that it wasn't sufficient that their financial modeling team was using this tool. You need to sell it to this team. Overall, I think that their weaknesses were not too difficult to overcome. They had a lot of strengths and a lot of things that were in place, but whoever took on that role needed to be prepared to do a ton of teaching, as well as some good bits of therapy and a lot of load balancing. Those are people skills that no one really tells us we have to have. And I think that if you just looked at what they were advertising for and what they were interviewing for, unless you were asking the right kinds of questions, you might have ended up in a scenario where you had to deal with a whole lot of people in a whole lot of difficult situations that maybe a whole lot of data scientists don't want to deal with. And I just said a whole lot of times. So scenario 2, even though it says scenario 3. Your team has some data science background, and you've been brought in as a manager. The good news is you're the leader. The bad news is it's all on you. So what now? Your first step is to get buy-in from above. Presumably you have this if they brought you in to manage a data science team. Presumably. That's not always the case. So you're going to want to make sure that from above they're on board with the changes you're going to want to make. Again, that's going to be a lot of things like making a business case for your tool of choice, showing them how your processes are going to be improved in efficiency and in workflow by switching over to these tools and techniques, and that sort of thing. It's not fun, but again, making a business case has basically been something I've had to do in every role at every job. More importantly, well, maybe not more importantly, but just as important, you have to get buy-in from below. Management approves, but analysts implement. I'm not a process change specialist. At one consulting firm where I worked, they had an entire team of hundreds of people. Seriously just went into firms where we introduced new EDW structures and got analysts and other developers on the ground to adopt these processes. There are entire expertises in this. I don't have that. And chances are you're being brought in to manage a team that's somewhat small. You don't have that either. So a few of the tactics that I found that work really well is to first identify boosters. Analysts who are enthusiastic about new technology, who are willing to learn, who see the value of expanding their skill set. Use them to start building your knowledge resources. If you have people that other analysts can go to ask questions, they're going to be intimidated to ask you because you're the manager. But if they have peers that they can go to, that makes their lives a lot easier. It makes it a lot less intimidating. Then you're going to have to think about how to deploy. My first thought is find a couple of likely projects that are upcoming and start using them in the new tool. You can get your boosters to take on those projects. It's sort of a reward for being willing to expand their horizons. They get to do the fun new project in the cool new tool. Then, piece by piece, transition every project over. If you're working only with legacy projects, again, identify a likely project, start doing it in the new tool next month, and then start working your way over to transitioning. One thing that I found that's very helpful is to take your most reluctant learners and have them port the remaining legacy code. That's helpful because your code base is already running. You're already getting the results that you know you should be getting, so they have a lot of time to sort of learn, trial and error, get comfortable with this tool, make mistakes. before they're asked to do something new that doesn't have known results in this new tool that they were already reluctant to adopt. All right. As always, document. I'm just going to say that every time. Document. I just get it tattooed on my face. Document. So an example of this is actually my current firm. I was brought in not just because they wanted to update their tools, but as we talked, we found that one of the goals of my current firm was to move off of SaaS, which is relatively expensive for a small firm, and onto something preferably open source, but definitely cheaper. I am a managing director, which means I have my own streams of revenue. I have my own projects and my own clients. That made it really helpful for me because I wasn't answering to anyone above me. So my tactics in this case were I came in. I don't have anyone that I've hired directly below me. We have a bunch of practice lines. All have managing directors. They all have their senior economists and analysts below them. I'm kind of adjacent to all of them. What I started to do was identify analysts across every practice group who were enthusiastic about new tools. In particular, I was trying to move us onto SQL for actual, managed data. Python, R, generally moving us more towards open source tools. But I realized that since we have so many different practice lines, we needed people in every practice line who could be those knowledge repositories, those resources that everyone could go to ask questions and say, hey, do you know of a tutorial for this? So I tried to identify people across practice lines, and I brought them in on my projects so that they could start to learn these tools. Once they did, we started suggesting other places where these tools might be useful. But my first step was just to build knowledge bases across the firm. I would say that some of the strengths of the firm that I'm in right now is that the management is really supportive of these changes. They are fully on board, so I'm not trying to do any sort of cost-benefit analysis. They understand why they want to change tools. Everybody at my firm is technically savvy. They all know how to program. They all know what they're doing. I would say the weaknesses that I'm facing is that we hire almost exclusively for skill in SaaS. It really relies on analysts to be eager about learning new tools for them to be able to come on board my projects. Additionally, and this is something I'll talk about more for the next piece, when I join in on other teams, which I do often, I am not the person at the top. And the person at the top is technically savvy and works in SaaS. They do not want to move off of SaaS because they do not want to have to learn how to deal with new programs to play with the data as they are used to doing. They're not in the role where they are heavy data users. They're senior economists. They're project managing. They're building the models, but they're not really implementing them. But they want to be able to play around in the data. So, team member. This is one of the toughest positions to be in. You've been brought into an existing team, and the idea is that they want to move on to this new tool. They're really excited. You were hired partially because they were super excited that you know X tool, but you're not the team leader. You're just a team member. There are people above you. There are people who are your peers. There may or may not be people below you. The first step is to figure out how much buy-in you have above you. If it's the people at the very top, but your immediate manager is really not about moving off of eViews, run. It's never going to work. You're just going to get really good at eViews. If your manager buys in and the people above them buy in, you're in good shape. If your manager buys in and the people above them don't buy in, you're going to have to work with your manager to get that buy-in from the top. But at least you have an ally. In general, if you're immediately against it, though, don't even try. You might have success, but it's going to be a really big uphill battle. Then you're going to have to get buy-in from your peers. This is a little bit easier because, again, you can identify boosters, people who are excited that you were brought in because you know this technology, people who are really eager to work with you and to work with these new tools. For people who are a little bit more reluctant, it can help to point out how, while you know they would never leave your awesome, amazing company, Being able to use Python, R, and SQL as opposed to SAS means that they could probably get hired by like a media company instead of a pharmaceutical company. So it might make them a little bit more competitive or marketable to update their skills. It could also make them candidates for upward movement in your own company if your company is going that way. So it's a good way. It's always great to remind people that it just makes them a little bit more marketable. And I've found that has been a great way to one of my analysts is laughing. It's a great way to recruit analysts into learning these new tools if it seems a little bit intimidating to them. The one thing your team members have that you don't is a lot of institutional knowledge. So they're going to help you be able to identify ideas and examples of tasks or projects that could be sped up or made more efficient by using the new tool. Leverage that institutional knowledge. Get one of your boosters to help you create a showcase example that you can bring to your manager or bring to higher ups and bring to your peers. I mean, I don't know about you, but I would be thrilled to save 15 minutes because we were doing something a little bit more efficiently. I mean, that's 15 minutes I'm doing something else. I'm not going to say it's browsing the internet, but it's totally browsing the internet. So leverage that institutional knowledge. Use the people around you to help you figure out ways to showcase the way that the beneficial uses of this tool. And then when you deploy, look for likely projects coming in, and then petition your manager for you and whoever else to handle this new project in this new tool. From there, once you've started moving projects over, it should be easier to move more and more projects over. Again, you're just trying to create that tide of change. That's what all of this is about, and it's going to take time and patience, and I'm going to warn you right now that when crunch time hits, everybody's going to want to default back to the tool that they're comfortable in. It's inevitable. So you're going to go 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. But you just have to keep pushing for that inevitable forward tide. Again, most of us don't go into companies thinking that this is going to be part of our job. And it sucks that it is, but it's also helpful to know that it's something that you're going to have to learn how to do. Unless you go into a really well-managed, very well-established company that has a great data science team in place and uses very up-to-date tools. In which case, learn all you can. So, as an example, again, I was brought into my firm as a managing director, but I do projects for all of the other managing directors too. I don't want to be an expert witness, but the econometric modeling for price fixing and antitrust cases is really, really fun. So I volunteer to help out on those projects. Above me, there are 2 people. There's a senior economist, and there is a managing director. Managing director doesn't care what we use. They haven't touched a programming language in 20 years, at least. The senior economist, though, is the person who's really handling the project from start to finish. They handle the client, they generate the report, they build the actual model, right, or specify the model and validate it. We have PhDs in econ, that's what we're hired to do. So they're really used to having a lot of access to the data whenever they want it. That's the crew that you've got to get buy-in from. Now, again, the strengths are, we already know that all the managing directors are very happy to be moving off of SAS. Everybody generally agrees that it's a good idea to do eventually, although all the senior economists are going to tell you not in the specific, though. Eventually we should, but not right now, not this project. We have technically savvy analysts, and most of them are very eager to learn. So we can at least have people who are willing to work in these new languages. So in general, the tactic that I've sort of taken with this company is patience, a lot of patience. But by already building knowledge or resources throughout the firm, using my own projects where I'm a managing director, I can then pull in analysts who are fluent in different languages onto projects for other managing directors. To get buy-in from the senior economists, generally it's just getting them comfortable waiting for data extracts. You can play with the data in SAS, let me dump it into SAS for you. But the primary data management is going to be happening in something else. And finally, we do adversarial replication. When you create models for litigation work, when they go to court, they're delivered to an opposing expert. That opposing expert is going to recreate your model. And then they're going to tear it apart with glee. Um, and so one of the best practices that I've introduced that I was honestly somewhat surprised my firm didn't do is that I take the final analysis data set for any project and I replicate the model in a different statistical software package. Doing this has actually shown a lot of our senior economists that SAS and Stata are both black boxes in some ways. There are things you cannot change about how the model is set up, and there are assumptions that the program is making about the model. R gives you a lot more flexibility about all of those options and a lot more transparency about the decisions that are being made for you. In one example, we found that SAS was running a particular model using the traditional equation. Stata is making a small sample correction. It shouldn't make a huge difference, but for our case, it actually made a difference, especially on some of our edge cases. It changed coefficients, it changed standard errors, and ultimately, it changed results. So, learning that and then seeing the value in replicating in another program, and then seeing the value in a program that's a little bit more transparent like R, where you have a little bit more control over the actual model, what really got the other senior economists on board. Because if there's anything economists are, it's control freaks. We want to know what it's doing, and we want to be in control of what it's doing. Again, I just looked for that point of entry to get buy-in from that group that's the most resistant. I think I'm talking too fast, but that's okay. We'll just be done a little early. Finally, the situation that I deal with most frequently right now. You're an external consultant. You're being brought in generally for your area of expertise. But you're being asked to build some sort of deliverable that you hand over. The good is that you've been brought in, especially for your expertise. The bad is that your client will forget 90% of what you have taught them the minute you leave. Just got to be ready for that. In some ways, this is the hardest one. My honest advice, meet them where they are. That's really the critical piece. You have to look at the tools in common use in the firm, figure out where they are in their current technology level, and be realistic about where you can get them, where they're willing to go. For example, if you have a client who wants a plug-and-play model for customer churn, and they primarily use Excel and are a little bit old school and kind of resistant to moving off of Excel, I think it's best to make your peace with the fact that you're doing a plug-and-play model in Excel. That's what you're building, and that's what you're delivering, because the client's not open to exploring new avenues, and this is what they want. So remember, again, as an outside consultant, you have to give the client what they want to some degree or another, and you have to meet them where they are with their level of technology. If the client expresses some interest in updating their tools, as several of my clients have, my first piece of advice is get buy-in from leadership in writing. Define your scope really carefully and remind them you are not a data management or data architecture or process change specialist. You are a data scientist or whatever. I am an economist. When one of my large airlines started asking for help with their actual data management, I gave them the phone number of on-prem because I'm like, that's really not what I do. I don't think they used it because their data's still a hot mess, but I knew my limits there. I knew that they needed to be shifted over onto an entirely different customer warehouse, and that's not what I do. But because they trusted me, I was able to give them advice on who they could go to. In some cases, though, I've been asked for help with, for instance, creating a stock-based compensation model that they've been doing in Excel traditionally, but understand that would be faster in something like R or Stata. The willingness is there. The ability to adopt is there. The fact that they've been programming a Cholesky decomposition in Excel means the technical ability is there. And so transitioning them onto something like R, where it's a single line command, was actually not very difficult. It turned out to be a fairly easy project. But in general, I try and identify the teams that are going to be most open to change and the teams with the most ability. So I work a lot with marketing. I work a lot with tax and finance. Very frequently, my tax and finance teams are not open to change. However, marketing teams are a little bit more interested in other tools. So I will usually choose members from the teams that have the interest and start to create a collaborative project with them. Again, if I build it and hand it over, they're just going to forget it. So I try and get some of their team involved in the actual build. That way they're getting a little bit more familiar with how to use the tool, and they're familiar with whatever model in particular that we're building. Finally, when I hand it off, I make sure I give them a lot of resources in as organized a fashion as I can, and I leave myself open for them to come back and ask questions as frequently as they need to. And that's very, very frequent when you're trying to get someone onto an entirely new tool and you are not part of their company. So I gave you a couple of examples of this scenario, but one of the things that I do is I help airline clients book their financials. So the way I help them do this is I do predictive models on their customer loyalty data. I help them figure out how many points are going to be earned, redeemed, expired in any given fiscal year, so that they can book their financials properly according to ASC 606 or whatever the new rules are since Best Buy tried to game the system. I'm not kidding. It was a pretty good story. But because of their shenanigans, there are now actually really sturdy rules, not sturdy, actually there are ways to game it, but there are concrete rules, at least, in place about how you have to predict those values and how you book them to your financials. All of my work is, of course, audited, and the auditors will replicate my work and rip it apart. But I found that all of my clients and their auditors were getting a little bit uncomfortable because I would run these predictive models, and I would use the outputs to then run through a series of calculations that ultimately gave them how many points or the percentage of points they could expect to break or expire or redeem or whatever. And they weren't really comfortable just getting a set of 3 numbers. They wanted to see a little bit more of what was happening. And what they asked for was a giant Excel workbook. This is what audit asked for, was a giant Excel workbook that went through a whole bunch of different calculations. And the first year, I did that by hand, and it was a mess. It's actually, once you start breaking apart calculations like that and you're not doing them in an automated fashion, it's really easy to make a lot of mistakes. They really liked the workbook, though. So ultimately, what we decided on is I generate that workbook in Python after I run the calculations. And I have my Python program run a check to make sure that the formulas I've programmed into Excel actually give me the correct numbers. Every year, 3 or 4 of my clients go, this is really cool. We should really learn a little bit more about your tools and Python and all this fancy stuff that you use. And every year they go, hey, when's the workbook going to be ready? But you know what? It's meeting them where they're at. It gives them the regression table. It gives them a couple of concrete customer examples, flowing through, applying those coefficients. What would be their probability of redemption? If you apply that probability of redemption, how would it flow into the calculations? And then if you aggregate across all users, here's what the calculations look like. It's meeting them where they are and giving them what they want to see in a tool that they're comfortable with. And maybe one day, 5 years from now, I will get a couple more of them onto something new and different. I'm not, counting on it, but it could happen. Tax and finance, they're really resistant. So, if you're going in and your expertise isn't changing tools, but you've been brought in as a data scientist and you understand that part of your job here is bringing your company into the future, the things that I suggest that you really focus on are patience, enthusiasm, buy-in from above and below, having some concrete examples of how your tool is better, the ability and the desire to teach, documentation, and as much documentation as you can do, and more patience. That's it for me. Any questions? One day I'll learn not to talk so fast. Yeah, what's up?
Thank you for your talk. In my experience, some of the tips and techniques that you gave did resonate very well with my experience. Specific question I have is, in my experience, I found these days to sell the value of data analytics or specific tools to a management or executive management was not probably very hard in my experience, but ultimately it has to trickle down to the analyst who's going to be handling the nuts and the bolts, right?
Yeah.
learning a new programming language or whatever.
Yep.
The typical saying, right, where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
I mean, especially in a very conservative company or a traditional company,
Yes.
right?
Managers approve, analysts implement.
Right. Culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's deeply ingrained culture.
Mm-hmm.
And then, can you unpack a little on how you could change that? You know, there's a saying, right? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. And
Yeah.
it's a wonderful strategy, but if your beats carrying things so long for a certain amount of time, how do you change that?
Yeah. The first thing I'm going to say is just admit to yourself that it's going to take a long time. This isn't something that's going to happen in a month, and this isn't something that's going to happen in a few months. This might take a year, maybe 2 years. I know there are some companies out there where the analysts are just so checked out that they have no interest in anything, but I think it's really rare to have any company or team where there aren't at least 1 or 2 analysts who are still enthusiastic about their potential to learn something. If not for their ability to use it at this company, then for their ability to maybe eventually move on and go somewhere more interesting. If you can access those people and get them enthusiastic, generally they'll infect the people around them. That sounded very diseasey, but that's what they're doing. Yeah.
I've experienced pushback from management at times with timeline of doing, like management who doesn't necessarily understand data science techniques and who don't understand how long that they can take sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any techniques for getting buy-in from that type of management?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I tend to overestimate my timelines with all of my clients, and I explain to them that if this project's going to take 4 months, 3 months of that are getting their data into usable format. And so sometimes with management who's a little bit less open to the fact that it takes some time, I actually put together presentations or slide decks that walk through all of the issues that we're running into in their data and all of the work it's going to take to get it to an analyzable data set, right? Because for me, I love data and it's awesome, but I care about it primarily getting it to a point where I can run analysis on it. And so, yeah, I've actually put together entire presentations that are meant to set expectations for a client because their data is couple steps up from garbage. What's up?
Okay, so I'm in this really unique situation that I think your scenario does not necessarily address, but I was wondering if you could advise on this. So
Sure.
in my company, we have people who are extremely supportive of analytics and data science and want to do it. The problem is the people in charge, and some of you guys might understand this, are like, all I know is Amazon and Google use data science. I don't know what it is, but we use it. So you get someone me or whatever, and you bring them in, and you hire this top-notch data scientist, and then you realize, oh wait, we don't collect data. Your product doesn't collect data. There's no data here.
Yeah. My best advice for that is try and figure that out when you're interviewing. Everybody wants data science. No one knows what it is. So, like I said, the company where I was being brought in and they had no data science in place, they at least had a concrete goal of an amount that they wanted to save by running analytics and distributing their money a little bit more efficiently. And so I could see that at least they had an understanding of how their data could be used. And they allowed me contact with their different DBAs and data groups to see if they had the data you would need to actually be able to do the types of models that they wanted to do. I think if you're in the position where you've been brought in and they want data science and they don't know what it is and somehow they manage to really fool you on the interview, because sometimes they really can do that, your best bet is to start thinking about what do you need to run the analytics that you would want to run for this company. What would be the benefit of those analytics? And then start coming up with a plan on how you get that data and just start pestering people. But have a concrete idea of what you need to be able to do your job and bring that to management. Yeah, what's up?
So, since you work in data science, you know that it's not an exact science.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of
Yes,
times,
science is a little
yeah,
bit of a
exactly, it's the
misnomer.
name.
It's all right.
But when you compare it to, like, say, results from your BI or like straight up just database,
Sure.
you can get concrete results. So from your SOW to the actual results, you can trace it back and sell your idea that way.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, management does not understand that when you pay all this money for data science, you might not get anything back.
Sure.
You might not.
Mm-hmm.
How do you explain that you're paying me loads of money, but you might not get anything at the end?
Well, I try really hard to find something usable that I can give them. But you're right, sometimes there's just nothing. You're just looking at this. Yeah, there's garbage. There's nothing. Yeah. So I usually, again, I'm pretty clear at the outset when we're talking about the project. I try and set expectations then. There is a probability, it is non-zero probability that you do not have enough data. So I have actually been brought in to run predictive models for booking financials on a company that had 4 months of data history. And I was like, why don't you just run a historical average? You've only got 4 months of history. I don't understand what you're hiring me for. Oh, it's because ASC 606 says you have to hire me. Got it. But I try and really set, expectations at the outset. And as soon as we get to a point where I go, oh, this isn't going to work. I'm running on a sample, I'm looking at what they're giving me, and I'm going, you don't have enough data, your data is too sparse, it's not measuring what we need. I go back to them immediately, go, this isn't working. I've found that if you're honest, they will at least trust you, and maybe they won't be pleased that they spent money on something and didn't get much back, but at least they appreciate that you didn't waste more money trying to get them something. But that's all you can do, yeah. What's up?
To what extent do you start to run a data set that's large enough that it's no longer feasible to run local calculations in your laptop, and you start having to consider larger database platforms or cloud computing and moving data around? And do you start running those scenarios? And if so, what do you do?
So a lot of my clients, because their stuff is transactional and it's a little bit, it can get kind of big. I think my largest client is maybe around 4 terabytes right now of transactional data, and I run it on AWS. So I do run on cloud platforms. Now, that's not actually possible for certain litigation contexts where the security requirements are such that it must be housed on local infrastructure. And so our company actually has massive in-house infrastructure that sucks because you have to maintain that and it's super expensive. And one of the things that we were actually talking with your colleague Rachel about is trying to move as much of our project work to AWS using their healthcare PII security to be litigation secure as possible, and minimizing what we run on local systems. And from there, if we're stuck on a local system and it's just due to legal constraints, we adjust our project timelines appropriately. That's all we can do, really. Yeah.
All right, guys. Due to time constraint, we're going to take one more last question.
Okay. What's up?
You mentioned how, like, with some clients where they use Excel, you have to meet them where they are. Is there, like, but you also mentioned, like, with the airline points that you used your own Python, like, kind of process, but meant, like, the end product was something in Excel.
Mm-hmm.
Is there, I guess, could you elaborate a little more about, like, the process of that, and also, like, is there a specific thing that you would give them that would make them, like, more interested in, like, moving on to Excel?
Yeah, so I think from the tax and finance perspective, because we're running these models once a year, and because the workbook that goes to the auditors is a single product, the scenario modeling is different. They're kind of more interested in that. But what we ended up ultimately deciding on is I have a Python program that actually writes the programs into the Excel cells. It just codes each cell for the calculation that needs to run, and then dumps in the raw data from whatever computation we've just done. And that lets audit see that the calculation is happening in Excel, and it all ticks and ties, but it lets me run automated checks to make sure that nothing's getting lost along the way, which is something that happened a lot when I was doing it manually, which didn't last very long. I'll be outside if anybody else wants to talk more. Thank you all.